Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to ForgottenWeapons.com. Today we're taking a look at a Schulhof's patent bolt-action rifle. This is lot 1476 in the upcoming September 2014 Rock Island Premier Gun Auction. We're out here taking a look at this because it's just pretty cool. Now, Schulhof, in fact Joseph Schulhof, was an Austrian gun designer of some note. This was not the only thing that he designed. And he developed this particular rifle with its most interesting feature, a rotary magazine. It held 9 cartridges, and he hoped to get a US military contract with this rifle. One of them was submitted to Springfield Armory for testing in 1889, and it went through a battery of quite severe tests and did actually quite well, all things considered. Now this particular gun that's up for sale here is a commercial production version. It is serial number 43. It has some commercial proof marks on it. You can see it doesn't have a bayonet lug out here. This isn't the gun that the military tested, not the specific example of the gun. This has a single locking lug up here. It is a cock on closing action, and this big lug locks against the receiver back here. That's what keeps the bolt closed when you fire. All right, so let's take a closer look inside the magazine here. You can see this metal bar. That's a follower. The cartridges don't actually ride on top of it. What happens is that follower pushes them into position in front of the bolt lug so they can be picked up and chambered. When I open the magazine, I push down on this little lever, and as I open the side plate here, I am actually winding up the rotary magazine. That follower does a 180-degree rotation, or 360-degree rotation inside the gun. Then I drop my cartridges in here, one at a time, just loose. When I close the gate, spring tension remains until the gate's fully latched, and you'll be able to hear it right there. That releases tension on, or releases the latch on the spring and puts the follower, puts pressure on the follower to run the cartridges around in a circle up under the bolt. Since there are no cartridges in here, when I close it, the follower spins all the way to its fully at rest position. This was a fairly simple magazine to use, and it ran fairly quickly. In government testing, they were able to load it full to a 9-round capacity and then fire all 9 rounds in only 12 seconds. It's actually pretty impressive. Very fast. 9-round capacity was quite large at the time. Most rifles had either 1 round or 5. And this magazine assembly is not particularly large. It's not clumsy. It's a very elegant looking gun. Now, while we're over on this side, we can take a look at the magazine cutoff. This lever snaps up. You can see that there is a detent right here on the bottom to hold it in place when it's not in use. When you slide it up, you can see this nice bright bar right here drops over the top of the follower and any cartridges that are in the magazine. That prevents them from coming into the line of travel of the bolt. So you can load the magazine, engage the magazine cutoff, so the mag stays loaded and you have 9 rounds at your disposal, and then single load the gun until such time as you need the magazine, and then all you have to do is flip that lever down and you have the magazine ready to use. Magazine cutoff, they were a very popular element in military firearms prior to World War I. Military brass were afraid that soldiers with access to a magazine rifle would simply waste ammunition. That, of course, turned out to be a fallacy, and it was not long into World War I when everybody in the world stopped bothering to put magazine cutoffs in rifles. But, of course, this was a late 1880s design. The military wanted a cutoff, so everyone who submitted a gun for military trials put a cutoff on it. One other element we can take a look at here that's kind of cool. On the rear sight, this is graduated out to 2,000 meters, which is optimistic. Not so much that the gun can't shoot well at that range, but that you would be able to make that sort of shot in any sort of combat environment. What I like about it, what a neat little detail, are these 3 little brass teardrops that have been placed on there. Those are at the 500, 1,000, and 1,500 yard marks, or meter marks. And I like it. Whoever designed this realized that all of these marks look pretty much identical, and there's a ton of them, and it's really tricky to try and count. You know, if you want 700, counting out to 7 under stress is difficult. So they put helpful little markers at your 500 increments. The bore on this rifle is gorgeous, probably because it hasn't been fired much at all. The ones that the military tested were in a 30 caliber cartridge. It fired a 215 grain bullet at about 1,800 to 1,860 feet per second, which is respectable, prior to the development of the lighter Spitzer cartridges. So I have some notes that I made on some of the testing of the military version of this rifle, which, I mean, it's the exact same gun. It's just the one that happened to be sent to military trials. First off, on the one that they sent for trials, the bolt handle was actually just brazed on, and it fell off partway through. They had to repair it. Then one of the initial basic tests was to put a 6 foot by 2 foot target, which pretty well simulates a standing profile soldier, at 100 feet. They then tested the speed of fire, both from the magazine and single loading. They found that in 2 minutes, with the magazine, they were able to get 42 shots off and make 29 hits on that target. While single loading it, in those same 2 minutes, they were actually able to get 43 shots off, but only made 19 hits. So, which makes sense. Loading the magazine took some extra time. I'm sure the soldier who was doing it probably wasn't super familiar with the gun. However, single loading it required the gun to come down off the shoulder much more and disrupted his aim. For speed, they were able to load the magazine and then discharge all 9 rounds in 12 seconds. To single load and fire 9 rounds took 15.5 seconds. For pure speed alone, just how fast can you run the gun, in 60 seconds they were able to single load 28 cartridges, which included 1 malfunction and two dropped cartridges that were just fumbled and dropped. With the magazine, they were able to run 29 rounds through this gun in 60 seconds. That's not bad. That's fairly fast. They then did a 400 round endurance test on the gun. So during the endurance test, they would do 50 rounds and then clean and check the gun and do another 50. They did 400 rounds in blocks of 50. They found after 150 to 200 rounds, the action of the bolt was getting fairly stiff, and it continued that way all the way to the end of the test. It turned out what had happened was the bolt body had actually become sprung and slightly bent. And that ended up being this gun's undoing in military trials. The Army decided that the bolt was just not durable enough in the gun. At any rate, after the endurance test, they took it and a mallet and a big lead block, and they actually hammered the bolt straight in order to continue their testing. They did accuracy testing from a machine rest or a bench rest at both 500 and 1,000 meters, or 1,000 yards. They would do a 20 round group. So, people today tend to do 3 or 5 round groups for accuracy. Well, the Army at this point took it seriously. They did a 20 round group, which is going to catch everything coming out of the gun. At 500, they were able to get 12 to 13 inch groups with this rifle from a rest. And that's not too bad. That's between 2 and 3 minutes of ankle. For comparison, they also had a 1903 Springfield set up on the same rest. That got a 6-inch group and a 9-inch group at 500 yards. They then backed out to 1,000 yards. They were able to get a 31 to 32 inch groups with a Schulhof at 1,000 yards, which is a very respectable group, I think, for a rifle that early. By comparison, the Springfield had one 20 round group that was 24 inches and another that was almost 41 inches. So this accuracy-wise was actually pretty competitive with the Springfield at the time. And lastly, they did penetration testing. They set up 1-inch thick pine boards spaced 1 inch apart. So you'd have a board and a gap and a board and a gap, etc. That was a fairly common protocol for penetration or ballistic testing at the time. The Schulhof was able to blow through 15 of those boards at 500 yards. Again, pretty respectable. It was firing a 215 grain, so fairly heavy, round nose bullet at about 1,800 to 1,850 feet per second. Lastly, they did decide to do an overpressure test. The problem was they were doing all this testing with some fairly experimental cartridges as well, and their overpressure testing cartridge blew out, and there was a crack in the next cartridge in the magazine. So the force of the overpressure case head blowing blew out the next cartridge. It blew open the magazine. It did some damage. It bent the bolt. At that point, they decided, first off, that they were done testing the gun because of the damage, and secondly, that the overpressure test wasn't really appropriate, that they didn't learn anything about the gun because, yeah, as the testers put it, basically any gun would have sustained serious damage from that particular cartridge, so it was kind of a meaningless test. Overall, they found the action and the general overall rifle to be excellent. They really liked the magazine. It worked very well, but they did not like the bolt. They found the bolt to be too fragile, and frankly, it bent during the endurance testing. And for that reason, they rejected the gun. Obviously, some of these were sold commercially, but they never saw very much commercial sale. This one is only serial number 43. At least a few hundred were made, but not all that many. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a cool chance to take a look at a very rare, unusual bolt action design. And as I mentioned, this will be lot 1476 in the upcoming Rock Island auction. And good luck.